So in this video, we're going to take a kind of a high-level view or overview, if you will, of modern level design for classic Quake. For some reason, that was difficult to say. Basically, what does it look like for me to make a level for Quake these days using my souped-up modern supercomputer, and what tools are most effective? Why do I like them? And I'll provide links in the description to everything that I'm using in this video, so you can go check it out for yourself and read up on it. Some stuff will require some reading, like the mod that we're going to use. But yeah, if you like classic Quake and you like level design, or you're just into retro gaming, hang around. This is going to be kind of fun. Okay, so I guess the first thing we'll start off with is what Quake engine do I like? Because there's a lot of options these days. Well, last year I came across this engine called Ironwail. And Ironwail really scratches all of the retro itches that I have. Let's just jump into Start Map so we can look at something we all recognize. But looking at this, I mean, so we've got the just little touches, like if I strafe left and right, we get the little tilty effect. Which to an original Quake fan, means something, or at least it means something to me. What I really like with Ironwail is that in the mode that it's in right now, it is pretty close to indistinguishable from the software renderer. Right? You see, there's let me find a good wall. Right, like the pixels are square and chunky. Right, they're square and crispy. The particles are square. The sky is nicely parallaxed and two-layered. The water effect, right, the teleporter effect, looks like it's supposed to look. It's doing the swirly bits. If I go inside the water, it looks like it's supposed to, like the classic water effect. Let me jump into DM5. Right, that's some good water. So you see we got the swirly surface effect. If I go underneath, this is the effect that I expect to see when I'm a Quake. Swirly, twisty water. And some of the ports over the years have made a good effort at making new effects for water, but I've never liked any of them. So anyway, this even goes so far, and I probably won't be able to capture it here, but if you tilt your camera at certain angles, you can get the affine kind of texture map warping on the top of the boxes and stuff. These boxes might look a little different than what you're used to. We'll get to that in a second. But the last thing I do to Ironwail to really bring it home, and let me pull up another map that we all recognize. We'll go to DM1, right? So if I pull the console down and I set my R scale, this is something specific to Ironwail, but if I say 6, which is where I like to play, and that's about the maximum, see, it chunks all the pixels down even lower, and this looks like the software renderer to me, which is absolutely what I'm after. Just that beautiful, chunky, crispy, jiggly, aliasy. This is the stuff that I love, and I won't apologize for it. This to me feels like Quake. This is the essence of it. Let's see, what else was I going to say about Ironwail? I think that might be it. Beyond that, yeah, Ironwail has all the modern amenities. It's got, you've got your larger limits, your faster rendering times, your use of hardware. It's like it does all the things you want it to do without doing any of the things you don't want it to do. To me, anyway. So that makes it my engine of choice. So that's what I'll be using for the rest of this video, and this is what I use whenever I make a Quake level. Okay, so I did mention a mod, and the mod that I use for all of my Quake mapping, well, I used to make my own mods, really, because I wanted certain features and things that weren't in the base progs, but these days I just use Copper. Copper is a fantastic mod made by Lunarin, and sorry, I'm uncomfortable now because I'm not sure if that's everybody. But he seems to be the name attached to it anyway. So we'll say Lunarin. And what I like about Copper is that Copper keeps the classic gameplay intact, but just it improves things. It raises the quality of life. So you see here when I hit escape in here, this is the Copper mod. I can go down here to get Copper info, and it tells you basically about the changes in here, right? Like, for example, if we look at the nail guns, it explains that the regular nail gun works one way, the super nail gun works a different way, just to kind of differentiate them a little bit, but not change them wholly, which is what I love. The Thunderbolt, can chain through multiple targets at a time and stuff like that. It's just, there's lots of great stuff. And so it adds modern perks to the game. Like, for example, one of the big ones that I always require is spawning monsters with triggers. Right? Being able to say, hey, I want to have 2 ogres spawn behind the player when they grab this key or whatever. Having to put them into their own little closet off in the void with teleport triggers that are linked to destinations and blah blah blah. With Copper, I just place those 2 ogres where I want them to be, and then when I hit a trigger, they spawn in. It's just, the quality of life improvement there alone is worth it. The other thing it has is, so this is kind of boring visuals. I'm just kind of standing in this room, but I'm not sure what else to do talking about Copper. But it does little things, like it changes the health pack pickups, for example. So I think this is a regular one over here, worth 25. And this is the rotted one that's worth 15. They're visually different now, though, where they weren't in Quake. But they absolutely look like they would in Quake. Like they fit the spirit, they fit the art style, and that's what I really like the most. The axe got smoothed out in its swing, but it still feels very much like the Quake axe. Or you would never mistake that for anything else. So anyway, if you're interested in trying out Copper, which I absolutely would recommend if you want to have a nice experience making Quake levels, again, the link's going to be in the description. I would go there and get ready to spend about an hour just reading through the documentation. Just you don't have to memorize it all, but I would definitely go in there and just skim through the descriptions, get an idea of what the map or what the mod can do, because once you start to leverage it, it can really save you a lot of time and make your Quake levels cooler. So anyway, on to the next segment. So if you've been doing Quake editing of any kind in the last, it's been so long now, but you've probably met Trenchbroom. But just in case, hey everybody, this is Trenchbroom. Trenchbroom, this is everybody. Say hi. So what this is a Quake level editing program. It's got all the amenities that you expect out of a Quake editing program, but it's so smooth and organic feeling that it's got 2D views as well in case you like those. But most of your work can be done in the 3D viewport, which is kind of hard to get used to at first, but you really do warm up to it. So let's say I've got this face. I won't go over the basics of Quake of editing. You know how it is. Like Quake brushes are made up of planes. When you drag one of those faces, you're actually dragging the plane up and down. That's why this doesn't move on its own. It actually is just dragging the plane upwards, which causes this normal to clip in differently. You can go into face mode if you just want to drag the face. You do have those levels of control. But the more fun options are, let's say that I want to extrude off the end of this brush. Not just resize the brush, but actually make another brush. Well, I can do an extrusion off the end. And beautiful, that worked great. What doesn't work great is, let's say I have this face and I want to make an extrusion off of this flat part at the beginning. Well, if I do the same trick, it's not going to work because it's picking up the normal from this clipped plane and it's projecting it down. So that's not what I want. What I wanted was a box that came off of there. Well, in that case, you just go into brush mode. Sorry, let me get the brush selected. Brush mode, and you double click that face, drag it out, and now you've got your straight face. And that works really good for stuff on an angle too, right? So like trying to extrude this face off would just be a nightmare. It's just not going to work at all. Not going to work at all. But if I go into brush mode, do that same trick, now I get a perfect extrusion right off of that face. So the modern amenities are great. Like that kind of functionality we would have killed for back in the day. And the texture alignment, or I should say rather the texture locking, is spot on. Like, look at this. Like, I'm rotating this mesh around, nothing is moving. It is perfectly locked in place. That's a huge luxury that we didn't have back in the olden days. Just incredible, right? So anyway, instead of my old man diatribe there, one of the other neat things that it does is, let's say I want to make a cut. Well, here, let's say I want to cut at this brick line. Well, if I do an extrusion, but I extrude inwards and let go, now I have two brushes split at that, at the spot where the yellow line was. Then I'm like, well, I'm going to separate this brick too. Great, just do an extrusion, and you're done. So fast, so fluid, so lovely. What else we got going on here? Oh yeah, and the one thing that I didn't love at first was the lack of some primitive tools. Right, it doesn't have stuff to like make cylinders. Right, but I did learn this trick. Right, if I do this and I copy it, make another one. I copy it. This won't be perfect, but it's good enough for an example. I grab all those brushes and do a convex. Grab all of these brushes if Windows would stop harassing me. Do a convex merge. Now you can get a cylinder built just using those brushes you mashed together. So yeah, that actually, thank you, Windows. Yeah, that's giving me, yeah, that'll merge stuff together. So that's great for cleaning up maps if you have a bunch of different maps laying around, or are there a bunch of different brushes laying around? Like when you get in the heat of things, and you're throwing brushes around like crazy, it can help to just stop and do a quick cleanup. But I didn't want to go anywhere without explaining what I consider to be the absolute killer feature in Trenchbroom. And it does, and it's funny because it has a lot of great features, but there's only one that I would consider a true killer. And that's instancing. And you didn't hear that wrong. It's instancing. To old school Quake mappers, this is like ridiculous black magic, but here's how it works. So inside a Trenchbroom, you can make groups. These are not the same as func groups that you do as a Quake entity. This is like an internal thing to Trenchbroom, right? So if I grab these, I Control G and I group them. The name does not matter, like unless you want to keep track of it. I just say, yeah, unnamed sounds great. So once something is grouped, when you select it, it picks as one big thing, which is just how Trenchbroom works. You can go inside the group if you want to and click individual things, then escape out. But that's larger Trenchbroom knowledge. The key thing here is that if I hit duplicate on this and drag it over, right? I go inside of this group and I grab this brush and I resize him, nothing happens to the other group, right? Which is what you expect to have happen. That's normal. Right? But if I, just to show you, I'll right click, there's a shortcut for this obviously, but if I create a linked duplicate and drag that linked duplicate over, now you can see there's like a purple arrow going between those two. And I'll make another one and I'll push it over this way. And they're all showing, when you have one selected, it draws arrows to the ones that it's referencing. But what that means is now if I go inside of here and resize a brush, they all change. And your brain probably just exploded a little bit inside, but you're like, yeah, now I can make standard doorways, standard light fixtures, standard pillars, standard wall segments, standard whatever I want to make, and just drop them in the map during the blockout phase, for example, right? And yeah, you can drop them in there, use them in their basic form, and then go back later and refine them and make them look pretty and do all the things that you need to do with them. And it'll just compile like this and look great. The individual, the instances can be rotated, obviously, and they'll maintain their texture locking and all that jazz. So this really does feel like using static meshes inside of something like Unreal, right? Because if you treat this group as sacrosanct, right? Like this is the mesh the artist designed, then you can literally treat it the same way. Now, generally, in a real level, you would probably, you turn that into like an entity inside the group, turn it into a func detail or a func detail wall or something. These are viz concerns we can maybe get into in a video in the future. But for now, I just wanted you to see that instancing is very possible and it's very awesome. So there you go. So again, if you've been in Quake editing for any amount of time in the last decade or so, you're familiar with EricW's tools. They are the state of the art. They're being updated still today, and they add all kinds of amazing features for Quake 1 level editors. They have, other games as well, I think, but I'm really only concerned about Quake. There's bounce lighting, there's radiosity, there's textures that can emit light. There's they're all multi-threaded. It's just, there's so many great features that there's really no reason to use anything else. So this is more of just a signpost to say, hey, tools, thank you. Okay. So you saw this map kind of at the beginning. I kind of started it up inside of Quake, and you saw, these 4 rooms in the sky and stuff like that. There's really nothing in here. We're going to use this as kind of a sample map so I can show you some of the features in the EricW Tools. That's going to be a better name for those. I'll just call it the tools from now on. So yeah, we're going to build a couple things. I'm going to explain a couple things, and you'll hopefully begin to see the value of using these. So to get started, we'll just compile this map. And how do I compile a map? Well, there actually is a tool called Q1 Compile. Obviously this will be linked in the description, but what this does is it gives you the option, or a nice way, to figure out what it is that, like all the options for your tools, right? So here's my BSP, Light, and Viz. There's a bunch of options for the engine. Like there's my dash game Copper, so I make sure I run with this the correct mod. There's different options. It does have a very cool option that I don't actually use, but is fun to play with, and that's this watch map file for changes. What that does essentially is whenever you save your map out, it recompiles it in the background. So by the time you Alt-Tab back over here to launch Quake, the compile is probably done already. It saves some time. I do find that if you're like me and you kind of save like a spastic rabbit, you can sometimes get out of sync. So I don't use it, but it's a very cool feature, and I'm glad it's in there. And hopefully they'll refine it just a little bit to keep up with people like me who use their computer weirdly. Is there anything else in here worth talking about? Not really. Okay. So anyway, when you get over here, I just, I got it all set up. So I hit Control C, it compiles, runs, and then we're inside the game. And off we go. Now, we're going to talk about a couple of features here of modern Quake stuff. Now, you're probably noticing that there is a lot of light in this map. There's, the whole main area is lit up, and there's shadows down in the crevices. This is all due to the Eric tooling. Now, there's a couple aspects to this. Right now, I'm going to verify something. Hang on. On my top view. Yeah, all right. Yes. Okay. So what you're seeing is not actually light. What you're seeing is that this compile flag right here, dirt debug. I'm not sure if you can read that in the video. Hopefully you can. But the dirt debug flag tells Eric's tools to compile the light maps in such a way that they only show the ambient occlusion. And I'll give you a second to recognize that I said ambient occlusion. Yes, they add ambient occlusion to the Quake engine. So let's go ahead and we'll build some quick stuff in here, right? So let's pull this over, pull that down. We'll duplicate you over here, pull you down there, pull you up there. We'll just throw some geo in, right? We'll do an inset here and inset down here. Delete this, go into the edge mode, pull you over. Okay, great. Hit save on that. Jump over to the compiler, run it. Now that new geo is there, but you can see it looks like it's firmly rooted down because there's ambient occlusion being computed into the light map. Now, when you have actual lighting on the map, what you're going to get is, the lighting you placed, plus you're going to get this ambient occlusion effect, making the corners and crevices and all that kind of stuff just a little bit darker. It adds so much to the visuals. I can barely even get into it. So that is what that effect was anyway. So one other really nice thing that's been added to Quake in recent years is lit water, or lit liquids, basically. And what I mean is the surfaces of water, of slime, that kind of thing, take lighting like every other surface. Like how many caves have you designed in Quake that were meant to be dark and gloomy, and all the water at the bottom was full bright, right? That's all been fixed. So I'm going to demonstrate this real quick because I've got this default setup. I've taken the sky texture away. If I fire this up, there's a little bit of lighting in here because I think I have a minimum light setup. But you can see the water is dark, like you would expect it to be. It is there, but it's just dark. So what I'm going to do is I am going to throw a light in here just so we can have some actual lighting. Save this, jump over here, compile this now. Okay, there we go. Now we have a light up here. If I jump up, you can see the light is properly affecting the liquid. This adds huge amount of immersion. So if you were ever afraid of using liquids in your levels because they always look goofy, well, they don't anymore. Okay. And the last feature that I want to show off is we now have surfaces in Quake that can emit light. So the setup is pretty straightforward. Like this is traditionally, ignore this guy up here. Traditionally, this is what you would end up doing. You would have a light surface, you put a light entity in front of it, and then I kind of have these turned down a little lower than normal. But if you then compiled the level and ran it, you would have the illusion that these surfaces are maybe spitting out light, and that works, but it's not ideal because every time you use these textures on a surface, you have to, you'll have to add light entities and all that kind of jazz. So we'll just throw them over here just for the educational value of it. Run it. Yeah, they're light, but obviously there's no light coming off of these ones over here. So with modern tooling, what you can do is you can make a light that has a surface name. And every surface in the world that has a texture that matches that name is going to get light entities spread across it using the settings inside of this light. So basically, you want to run this now, those surfaces now give off light the way you would hope they would. And this just makes it very, very easy to light a level. Like if you have a military level with all sorts of light strips and stuff everywhere, once you set up that light strip texture with a light entity, you're done. Just texture things the way you would, and they will light naturally. You'll get the light bounce, you get the light occlusion, you'll get all that wonderful stuff. And it's just it's pretty easy to make nice looking stuff in Quake these days. So yeah, we should do some of that. Okay, so it's time for your bonus feature. I was going to save this for a different video, but I think I'll give a quick preview here because it's not that good of an example. Anyway, so there is an exporter for Blender that will take your Blender geometry with the UVs and export it to the clipboard in Quake format. So for a quick setup, here's what I've done. I've exported one of these textures and pulled it into Blender as a material. I then created this mesh, right, which is a terrible looking mesh, but it's got UVs and it's got some geometry on it. So now I'm like, well, this is a great shape. I would love to put this into my Quake level. Well, you invoke the exporter, and then over here is where this exporter's options live. Now, generally, I have to scale it up by 32 and stuff like that. And change where is the output format from file to text. If you change it to text, it's going to export it to the clipboard, which is your fastest method of iteration. So doing that, and it's going to put it into a func detail entity. So I'll just hit the button, boom, go. Now if I flip back to Trenchbroom and I point somewhere and I say paste, now you can see now it has dropped it into the level. Has all the texture alignment that I asked for. It's got the texture on there. And you can see what it's done. The more experienced Quake heads in the audience are like, oh, it's made a bunch of pyramids. And the back of the pyramid is a skip texture. And this is one way to do it. There's a couple other ways to go that we'll also get into, but this is the baseline for this. So I'm going to save this, jump over, and we're going to compile it just so I can show you that if I run over here now, yep, there's our mesh. Now there's weird error splooge, right? So you are going to have to be prepared for that if you're going to be delving into this kind of thing. But this is purely for if you have a specific use case in mind, like you want to make a custom light fixture or something like that in your level, or a custom piece of wall or that kind of stuff. This is beautiful for that. So let's talk about a few of the other options here. Okay, so I think the first thing we need to do is to fix this mesh up a little bit. The modeling got kind of got away from me. So we'll align that edge, align that edge. That's actually, yeah, this is a little janked up still. So if I go like this, I'll kind of pull him up to about where he needs to be, roughly. You know, we're not going to get it perfect, but you can get an idea of the convenience here, right? You can just use Blender for what Blender's good for and have it turn that into BSP meshes for you. Okay, so we're going to do this, export it again, jump back to Trenchbroom. Where are we here? Over here. So, and paste that version in and drag him, I don't know, here. Sounds fine. So this already looks better. You can see there's less distortion, less corruption, that kind of stuff. So just for fun, we're going to save and compile that and see what it looks like. Okay. So yeah, way better. We don't have the splooge anymore because we fixed up the mesh. There's a crack there, but that could be dealt with later as well. And because, this is Quake, there's weird jagged lighting going up the different brushes because these are all broken up now into triangles, right? So we're going to have to do something with that. Now, luckily, modern Quake tools, because of the EricW Tools, we have a property we can throw in here called Fong and put a value of 1 in there. And that's going to tell it to light that entity or those brushes using Fong shading, which is going to smooth everything out. Right? Looking nice. Now we're still going to have the crack in the geo over here, but that's because like when you're inside, like if this becomes a problem, you're going to have to probably quantize the verts inside of Blender, make sure they're all on the grid. But for just some quickie geo or like a very specific case, like say you have like a fancy exit gate or a fancy teleporter or whatever, and you want to model it in Blender, yeah, this is a great way to do that. So let's talk about a few of the other options here real quick. So if I'm back here, now that method of exporting, what you just saw, is basically taking every triangle and turning it into a pyramid, like I said, which makes each triangle its own brush, which works, but depending on your needs, there's better ways of doing things. So see, the mesh faces, yeah, you can just change this up to be whatever you want. We'll just show you shell. Shell is another one. So shell will basically take, I think, entire quads and extrude them back as opposed to making pyramids. Let's just go see what that does. I will say, yeah. And let's just leave that one in there. So if I paste you in here and then whirl around to the bottom, yeah, you can see that these are not, these are not spikes anymore. They're extruded. So they're a little more tolerant to the way the BSP works. And maybe this is not obvious looking at the video, but trust me, when you get playing with it, you will notice the differences. So let's compile that just for funsies. Oh yeah, and he's going to need he needs to also be given the Fong key, which I misspelled. There we go. Save you, jump over here, compile, see what's going to happen. Okay, right. Okay, so he's looking good. And I'm also, yeah, and you see, so the spiky method, it gave us these little cracks in the mesh here and there, but I'm not seeing that on the extruded version. The extruded version looks pretty clean, actually very clean. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you're getting weird holes and things in your mesh, you could always go back and do it a different way. And one last thing I'll show is the terrain. Let me just see what it does here before I explain it and make sure that this is working correctly. Yeah. Okay. So what terrain does is terrain just extrudes down the z-axis. Right? It just takes every triangle and extrudes it straight down a set distance. So the inside of this is all solid now. And this, I'd be willing to bet some good money that this will compile the best of all of them. So we'll see. It's the one on the far right. So let me save and compile. Yeah. The floor is missing because the brush was touching the floor, and that's actually the correct behavior. That should be clipped away. So just to make it look like the other ones, we'll lift him up so he's not going to cut the floor. And we'll throw him a Fong 1, save him out, go for it. Okay, and now we're not clipping the floor, and we're still getting the proper clipping everywhere else. Oh, but he's got some extra issue here. See that little sticky piece of geometry coming out there for, for reasons? Yeah, he's got some weird geo corruption. But I mean, so as cool as this feature is, you do have to be careful because you can get yourself in a weird position where the geometry is going bad and that kind of thing. And you certainly don't want to do it for anything that's critical the player wants to walk on. But, well, that's not entirely true. That can work out just fine as well. But the key here is that you want to use this to UV things, right? Like if I go into here and I'm like, okay, there's the UV map for this particular face. And if I want to go into edges and grab that edge and scale them like this and make that middle circle have the faces fit on there exactly and a bunch of splooge on the sides, right? I just do that. I export, I jump back, and there we have exactly what I did in Blender, right? There's the faces are aligned in the center and there's splooge on the side. So this is the kind of stuff that would take you forever to do in Trenchbroom itself. But again, so let me take these ones out. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. So then I just right-click this, or hold on. Yeah, sorry, I make him a group, copy him over, make him a group, copy him over, rotate him around like this. He can get rotated up like that. Right, so these are now all instances of each other. So if I jump into my compile tool and run this through, and there they are. We have those instances. Like say you had a bunch of like decorative bits, right? Like say you wanted to look through a grating and you would see some sort of elaborate pipe system or something. That's totally something this would be great for. Or custom teleporters where you have like a fancy edge column with a bunch of turned rune stones and stuff like that. They just slap a clipping brush over it to eliminate the collision issues, and and you're done. So yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this. That's just a basic kind of introduction, but I wanted you to see that it is possible to take stuff from Blender and model it and UV map it in Blender and pull it into Quake. I mean, it's a hugely powerful workflow. For people like me that really enjoy visuals, I'm going to have just hours of fun with this thing. So there you go. That's pretty much the extent of what I wanted to show today, just to give you a kind of a look into what's possible with modern Quake and with modern tools on modern machines. It's really very cool. You get that same kind of retro crunch, but you don't have to deal with the limitations of your old Pentium or your old 486 or whatever it is you were developing Quake levels on, way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we're making Quake levels out of stones. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next one. Have fun.